Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not my beat.
Today we welcome in our friend and colleague Kevin Sheehan, host of the Kevin Sheehan Show here on the Team 980, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Kevin, how are you, sir?
What's up, Craig? How you doing?
I'm doing well, man. It's been a busy week. I don't know if you heard, there's stuff happening.
Yeah, it was a busy week. It was actually a little bit of a surprising week. I don't think any of us had both of them being traded.
Yeah, I definitely didn't have that as the favorite. Although I can't say I'm terribly surprised, all things considered, considering the markets for both and the fact that one, seems like they would have accepted just about anything, and the other, they got what they got. Like, it makes sense at the end for me. I haven't had a chance to tune in. We're moving this week, so not the greatest for listening to a bunch of stuff, but where have you landed on it for folks that, maybe work during your show and haven't heard kind of the high-level thoughts on the deals?
No, I mean, I think that, the Sweat trade is, probably not necessarily was their first choice to move them, but I think we all heard they got an offer that was, probably close to the end of the first round when all is said and done with Chicago's second-round pick. And clearly they wanted to move Chase, and what they got back for him. I understand completely everybody's frustration because you go back to 2020 and he was the number 2 pick in the draft and he was the defensive rookie of the year, and it just seems like a very disappointing ending, and looks really now like one of the all-time franchise draft busts. I mean, it's top 5. All time, after moving him on Tuesday. But, I think it was a decent football day. I just was not overly thrilled or very impressed with the anonymous leaks about Chase Young that followed. I thought that was, that reeked of kind of Dan and Bruce low rent stuff. But other than that, it was, a decent football day.
So I don't know. Like, I guess I come at that as a reporter, and I want people to tell me stuff, and that part of my job description, I'm always we'll go back on that because I could see myself as the reporter who published that stuff. Like, you always want to be diligent, especially when it's negative about a young person, which Chase at 24 still is. But at the same time, if this stuff is true, I think the bigger problem is that it's true, not necessarily that it gets out.
I think you misunderstood me.
Yeah.
I have no problem with the reporters reporting it. I have a problem with people inside that organization, likely from the coaching staff, kind of kicking him on the way out. I mean, they had 3.5 years to confront him, and I'm not debating whether or not it's true. In fact, I think probably all of it's true.
Right.
We've all been hearing for 2 years, that it's been a difficult time with him. But kind of the, addition by subtraction, the stuff that, Mike Silver, I don't have any problem with Ben or Mike Silver or anybody else writing it. I have a problem with the team leaking it.
Yeah, I hear you. I also did, we can be adults here. Like, Mike Silver and Ron Rivera have known each other since college. Like, I thought it was incredibly bizarre that Ron, kind of acted like he was super upset and angry that it got out yesterday.
Yeah. Not exactly. It certainly didn't come off as completely forthright.
Yeah. So there's that part. It does speak to a larger issue that I'm curious your take on, and it's a thing that we've spent some time on over the last 24 hours or so, which is, it doesn't work. Part of that is on Chase. Part of that is on the organization. How do you kind of divide up the responsibility for having this talent that everybody agrees is super talented, but and by the way, that it could very well flourish in an environment like San Francisco, and the inability to create that environment here?
Yeah, it's a really good question as to what happened. I mean, I think, you certainly can't take the player off the hook. I mean, this has been, going back to the end of his rookie year, there were moments where we know why they were frustrated. He was one of only 90 players that didn't show up for an OTA day, not even one. I mean, it would have been fine had he shown up for 1 or 2. Nobody would have said anything. Coaches would have been fine, but he had the C on his jersey, and he didn't post for 1. And a lot of this is on the player, of course. But I also look at it, Craig, as maybe they should have coached him better. Maybe this was a player that didn't fit into, a very rigid scheme, adhering to, the scheme, being super, beholden to what the play was. Maybe, Bill Parcells never said Lawrence Taylor was easy to coach. I'm not comparing them. Trust me. I'm just saying that sometimes you have a talent that you have to adjust to a little bit. And maybe ultimately the talent wasn't transformational or generational, which we thought it was at the time. And maybe that would be their answer back on that. But the one thing that I think is frustrating in hindsight is that they were clearly frustrated all along. And everything that they leaked and just dealing him for basically a fourth-round pick for all intents and purposes tells you just how badly they wanted to rid themselves of him. And I wonder why that at any point they weren't tough with him. Why they didn't bench him. I mean, Emmanuel Forbes got benched, in the first 5 games. If he was really difficult to coach, maybe they should have been tougher with him.
Yeah, it's a tough question because I
think
it is
because we don't have enough information.
Yeah, and I mean, do you risk embarrassing a guy who's got that kind of star power? Like, what does it say? I think there's probably some of that, and I do think that there's a bit of like. It's so funny when people talk about an old school mentality. So much of old school mentality often is just like protecting people. And instead of like really being confrontational, it's like, oh, it all stays in house. I think sometimes for a guy, especially the modern athlete who grew up in kind of the social media age, and I've said this before, like for me, I grew up watching SportsCenter. Like so anybody that's like my age, if you're thinking of what kind of behavior you want to avoid, it's being on SportsCenter for the wrong reasons. And so if that's kind of some of the motivation, I do wonder if there's even to a point a generational disconnect in how they may have tried to discipline or punish him or keep him in line or coach him hard, and the way he actually received any of that information. I don't know that anyone will ever talk about it to the length that we are talking about it here and would love to know, but I sure as hell would love to find out.
No, I think I know what you're saying. I mean, it's very possible that there were other ways to get through, and maybe they weren't as open-minded to those ways, and as flexible to those ways. And it is different now. Coaches tell you it's different now. And look, in college now, it's a lot different because basically they have annual free agency. So you have to coach them and treat them in a way that makes, that ensures that you don't lose them 6 months after, they play for you for the first time. So yeah, it's different. But I don't think anybody should take him off the hook either. It's not like he is a child. He's 24 years old. He's a young player, and I'm rooting for him to succeed at some point because I was so high on him coming out of Ohio State. I thought we were looking at generational kind of talent. And the rookie year, the end of the rookie year, he made game-changing plays. And the injury, I'm sure, had a lot to do with it, but there's a lot of other stuff that maybe we'll never even hear was a part of it. And it probably includes him growing up and being a little bit more mature.
Kevin Sheehan with us here on the Hoffman Show. So now the rest of this season, as if it wasn't already, but more definitively becomes about Sam Howell and his development. Like if we take this as the halfway point, 8 games in, what do you think of the job they have done developing him so far?
You mean you're not looking at the schedule, figuring out how they can get 6 wins in their last 9 games to go 9-8? And snag the 7 seed? Come on, Craig. It's not over yet.
I mean that can. Well, I think actually, like all snarkiness aside, the idea that like people think that you have to make a choice is ridiculous. Like it's actually a gigantic pet peeve of mine is that people think that you can't both develop a quarterback and win at the same time. Like the whole point of a game plan isn't to set up your quarterback to succeed. I
thought you were talking about the choice of 9-8, 7 seed, or lose out and have a really high draft choice.
That also doesn't matter to me. But yes,
I loved what I saw last week. It was the most impressed I've been by everything that they've done, and they didn't win, and it didn't end well necessarily. But the first 45 pass play calls in the game. before, say the last 2 or 3 series. I just thought it was really impressive. I think I may have mentioned this to you or Logan at some point, but and I know I've mentioned it on my show many times, but his offensive coordinator, Phil Longo at UNC, I mean, I've had him on the show probably 3 times in the last year and a half. And each time he would say he's got to be in an offense that's West Coast, that is quick, get the ball out of his hands. Like, they knew at North Carolina, he's not a set-up 5-step, 7-step, wait for longer developing plays downfield, that's not what he was ready for. And I think what we saw just in the first 4 drives of the game Sunday was a way to get him confident. It was a way to get the offense moving. It was a way to frustrate the defense a little bit, and it just all ended up kind of coming together. So I hope we continue to see that. I mean, every team's going to play them differently. And I think one of the things we've learned about Philadelphia this year, they don't run well in their secondary. I think their secondary is big in name, but not necessarily performance. And in 2 games, Washington had their way with them throwing the football for the most part. But I loved last week. There's a lot to be encouraged about as it relates to Sam Howell, but there are still, significant concerns. And we have 9 more games just this year to kind of watch it. And I hope we get to see him in all 9. I think we will.
Yeah, definitely. As long as he can stay healthy, I wouldn't see why not, but we'll see with the amount of sacks that he's taken. I feel like last week, Kevin, the game plan was also so, maybe not so different, but definitively different. Like, they really did do the stuff that you just talked about. They got the ball out of his hands quickly. It had to be the most screens they ran in any game. And I know it also is an offense that is effective against what Philadelphia does. But my questions are about Bieniemy and his ability to keep that kind of game plan moving forward. And I where is your confidence level in his willingness to do that? Because it's not an ability; it's a willingness to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were, again, I think it might have been with Logan, but we were talking about just, hopefully there isn't a stubbornness there, and there's more of an understanding. I think we have to this is 8 games with a quarterback in a brand new system who's never played in the NFL before, and with a coordinator who's admitted that he is very much in the process of learning, even though he's been an offensive coordinator, but never with this much responsibility. And I think that it's a process, and we have to sit back and let it play out, because I think even at the beginning of the year, any reasonable person would say it'll probably be a roller coaster. There will be some weeks that it'll look good. There will be some weeks that it won't. And, you just have to wait. And hopefully by as you approach the second half of the year or the final quarter of the season, it really starts to come together. And then you can say, all right, these are our guys. So that's kind of my position. But it's been a roller coaster. I mean, the Arizona game was ugly. The Denver game was pretty good. The Buffalo game was hideous. The 2 Philadelphia games, great. The Giants game, god-awful. The Falcons game, good for a half, not so good for the other half. The Bears game, kind of, awful first half. So it's been up and down, and I would expect it to be that way for a few more weeks. But maybe it was a much different game plan than the one against the Giants. I mean, there were 14 5-step or more dropbacks in the first half. We had only those on 1st and 10 play action with, medium to max protect. And that was to take a shot after they had already gotten the quick game going. So I loved it on Sunday. I hope we continue to see it. If it makes sense against the defenses that they face, sometimes it won't. And they even ran the ball better last week. Not a lot. He doesn't run it a lot. But I think, Philadelphia was a little bit off balance, for much of the day.
No doubt. The threat of running it was there. It's funny you mentioned the defenses that they face. That could be interpreted as the rest of the season, or it could be interpreted as Sunday, because the Lord knows what Belichick will do. And he destroys young quarterbacks, and it's in part because he confuses the hell out of him. I have no idea what to expect Sunday. Do you have any early leanings on how that thing goes?
No, it's just good that some of their better players aren't going to be playing, but I actually think this is a great opportunity. It's like he's going to try to confuse a young quarterback, and by the way, an inexperienced full-time, play caller. And so these are the kinds of experiences they want to go through the rest of the way. You get that, and then the next week you're going to play in the most difficult, you could say, road environment in the league against a team that's pretty good. You get, San Francisco later in the year, the Jets later in the year. So all of these experiences hopefully will add up to something at the end of the year that we, have a more definitive opinion, because I don't have, a definitive opinion on either at this point, Bieniemy or Howell. But it's encouraging, certainly on Sam Howell.
Yeah, I agree. And I think people are in a rush to want to know because certainty feels better, even if you're certain that it's not it. But let's say for a second they don't have to worry about drafting a quarterback, that whatever the threshold is that we're looking for, they reach it. How are you approaching the 2024 draft now with the picks that they have? Like, you got a great eye on college football as well as the NFL. So is there anything in particular in terms of draft strategy that you're thinking about this far ahead, guys that you like, positions that you're high on, knowing what this team is going to need this offseason?
Well, I think watching 8 games this year, we know what they need. They need an offense. They need offensive line help for sure. And I think they wanted to draft that. I think they wanted to draft the kid from Tennessee, and I think they would have had he reached them. But really, by the time they picked Craig, remember, almost all of the best offensive linemen were gone. I think that the quarterback issue is going to be a big issue, but wouldn't it be great to be able to draft, the kid from Notre Dame who's at the top of everybody's board, the tackle, forgetting his name now, him. Wouldn't it be great to have a chance, at another, at this point, maybe a pass rusher? I think a pass rusher will be in need as you approach the draft, but I haven't given a lot of thought to it. But O-line, pass rush, and of course, I'm not discounting the possibility that they're going to need a quarterback when we get there.
So let's go full circle then and kind of wrap up in a way where we started. We started off talking about Chase and the pressure and all those kinds of things. Let's say for a second, and now it's the part where everybody riots because I'm going to say, let's say for a second Sam Howell doesn't work out and they draft a quarterback in the first round next year. What are the things that this team has so miserably failed at in the past with high pressure players, right? Prospects that have a lot of intensity in terms of expectations on them that they need to make sure is shored up under this new ownership so that player, assuming it's a quarterback, can succeed?
I'm not following the question. Sorry.
So, like, you think of the most hyped players they've had over the last 15, 20 years. Robert didn't work out. Dwayne didn't work out.
Well,
Chase didn't work out. So, like, how do they create an organizational structure so that the next guy, if it's a quarterback especially.
The owner shouldn't be making the pick. So let's start
that
there.
does help. That does help.
Yeah, that helps a lot because, the 3 players that we've Robert, Dwayne, and even Chase to a certain degree, remember how badly the owner wanted a local player. Let me just tell you, Craig, as somebody who lived through the glory years, none of the championship teams had local players on it. Nobody cared. Riggo was from Kansas, Theismann from New Jersey, Dexter from Texas. Like, nobody cares about where these players played high school football. But anyway, enough on the old days. They need a really good football person. That's the first thing when this season ends. I would assume that they're working on it already. Then you need a really good coach, and then you need a really good draft strategy. But in terms of, steering clear of things that haven't worked, I think, the number one reason that a lot of these guys didn't work is out of the building. And hopefully all attached remnants to that owner, will be gone by the time we get to mid to late January as well.
Fair enough. Kevin Sheehan, host of The Kevin Sheehan Show, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. here on the Team 980. You can also check out the Kevin Sheehan Show podcast. I know you had Rivera on, as you do every week, talking about these trades recently, and Logan's on there sometimes. I'm still waiting for my call, Kevin, but it's okay. I'll wait patiently.
I will call you, I promise.
Okay. I have faith. And by the way, we're definitely going to start having you on to talk a little basketball, not necessarily today, but it is hoop season, which makes both of us very happy.
Yeah, well, I mean, we don't have much of a pro team, but I think the Terps will be pretty good this year.
Yeah, we can talk about them, and we can talk about other pro teams, and then be like, oh, yeah, the internal metrics on the Wizards are the same as they ever were. All right, that's Kevin Sheehan. You'll hear him tomorrow right here at 10 a.m. Thanks, Kevin. See you.
Right.
And then Kevin's, of course, also with us on Sundays. He's with us 10:30 a.m. On the Take Command pregame show. Myself, Logan Paulson, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. That's the same time Kevin's on during the week. We have it on Sundays, getting you ready for each and every Commanders game live from Tap Sports Bar at MGM National Harbor.
This is the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.